distinguished Prime Minister, President, Honourable Lennart Meri's family, dear friends. When we gathered here in Tallinn a year ago, most of us were probably in a more optimistic mood than today. At least I was. Ukraine had liberated a considerable part of its territory in the fall of 22, and it was reasonable to hope that the same trend would continue in the summer of 23. Unfortunately, last year's counteroffensive was not successful, and since autumn, Ukrainian troops have been under heavy pressure at the front and have had to retreat, primarily in Donbass. While there have been great success stories in the last year, for example, the significant weakening of the Russian Black Sea fleet, these have not prevented the general mood in the Western societies, and especially in the Western media, becoming pessimistic and sometimes prone to panic. Even so, Ukrainians themselves are calm and very determined. They admit that their tasks are very difficult, but at the same time, they know that they must keep fighting, because the alternative is the end of their statehood and, on personal level, death, imprisonment, or flight to the West. It has been a tough year for Ukraine. The half-year blockage of the aid package in the US Congress and the extreme caution of the US administration has shown in supporting Ukraine have raised the question, and not only in Ukraine, of whether the US still can and still wants to be the leader of the free world. In 2003, Robert Kagan wrote that Americans are from Mars and Europeans are from Venus. Today, we can reasonably ask whether the Americans are now moving to Venus. And listening to some Europeans, such as President Macron, to ask if Europeans are preparing to move to Mars, or at least some of us. The events of October 7 and the subsequent war in Gaza have also significantly distracted the attention of the West from Ukraine. The war in Gaza has also led to considerable internal divisions in the Western societies. With all this, we hardly have enough time for Georgia, where there is an era-defining struggle going on. Today's Tbilisi can be compared to Kiev in 2004 and 2013. The question is simple: whether the country will continue on a European course, or whether an oligarch with a Russian background will essentially gain absolute power. Lennart Meri said in 1997, "The situation is shit, but it is the fertilizer for our future." And John F. Kennedy said in 1958, "Let us not despair but act. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." Hence the theme of our 17th Lennart Meri conference: let us not despair but act. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is not what Russia is doing or what China is doing. The question is whether we want and dare to stand up for our values. Are we ready to make a real effort, willing to endure difficulties and sometimes to take risks? Or we still hope that the problems that threaten us will somehow pass by themselves and that we can return to normality? Unfortunately, this doesn't work. Trying to appease evil simply makes the situation even worse. So it's up to us. Europe's relatively effortless liberation from Russian energy dependence clearly showed that we have the strength and the resources to prevail. But we must work hard to regain our focus and determination. Finally, as always, I would like to thank all those who have contributed to the success of this conference. Our partners in public and private sectors, sponsors, my colleagues at the ICDS, and of course, our new director of the conference, Helga Kalm. I wish us an exciting conference and turn the stage over to Henry Foy, the moderator of our first panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel you've already stolen the show with the quote, though. But at least we know if the panel is shit, it's good fertilizer for the rest of the conference. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Henry Foy. I'm the Brussels bureau chief of the Financial Times. It's a pleasure to be here to moderate this panel. The first of what I know will be 48 hours of really interesting and insightful discussions. Our panel is titled Brave New World, Building a Stronger Europe, and I'm struck by how apt it is that we're here in Tallinn, given the work that Estonia and its Baltic and Nordic partners have done in making Europe stronger over the last 2 years. I'm thrilled to introduce our panel. We have Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas. We have the President of Iceland, Guðni Jóhannesson, the Vice President of the European Commission, Věra Jourová, and last but by no means least, Michał Baranowski, the Managing Director of the German Marshall Fund East. Now, and unfortunately, the President of Estonia is not able to join us this afternoon. Normally, these panels, we like to start slow and make people feel comfortable, but I thought I'd cut straight to the chase. Prime Minister Kallas, we've heard for the last 2 years so many speeches and rhetoric and opinion pieces and strategy documents talking about how Europe has woken up and got serious about its own defense. Is that true? Is Europe a geopolitical power, or is it just a paper tiger?
First, I wanted to say about that quote. This is so overly used in Estonia that I've never used it in my foreign speeches because everybody knows this quote. But it's great to see this reaction that you definitely didn't hear this before. But is Europe a geopolitical actor? Yes, I think so. If you think about the different things that Europe has started and what we have done together during these 2 years. I can just bring a few examples. What we have pushed for and where we have seen some kind of development. I mean, first is of course the frozen assets that we just got news a couple of days ago that or was it already last week? That European Union is using the proceeds of these frozen assets. Of course, it's not enough, and our Parliament just adopted the law to use the frozen assets of Russia to the benefit of Ukraine. I think this is something that G7 is coming on board. The discussions are going on there, and it's definitely something that we have pushed from the European level. Then second, I think it's the European defense. Showing that we are a geopolitical actor. Getting our act together in terms of defense. Of course, it's still not enough if you think about that only 18 countries will reach the 2% investment. But still, there are different initiatives in order to get the defense industry going. There are different initiatives to really boost European defense and show also to the taxpayers of United States that we are taking defense seriously. And third point that I maybe want to raise as an example of this is the talks and negotiations about accountability. Just was it yesterday or a few days ago when Antony Blinken was saying that we have to hold Russia accountable for the crimes committed, or very similar what we have been saying all along, to get specialized tribunal together so that really have an effect that they are held responsible what they are doing. These are the things that actually have come from Europe. We have been the leaders here, and I think these are examples that we are able to act as geopolitical power.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm keen to hear whether or not you agree with that, whether you're so positive as the Prime Minister, but also Iceland's become even more rare recently as a country that's either in the EU or NATO and not both, which is, I think is great for everyone. How has your relationship changed with both those organizations over the last 2 years as security, defense, and integration effectively become more important?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks to anyone and everyone who has organized this great conference. I've been in Estonia now for a couple of days. Had a lovely time, well received. I've enjoyed the kindness and hospitality of the people of Estonia, and grateful for that. Icelanders are always well received here. But now, yes, we're at a conference about, yes, the EU and security. And I'm tempted to recall lines from a popular pop song in Iceland. I'm the wrong person at the wrong moment in the wrong house. We're not a member of the EU, and we're not going to apply for membership anytime soon, if I know my country people correctly. And security. We don't have a military. We've never had a military. Military knowledge in Iceland is quite minimum. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sure. We're blessed. We're an island in the middle of the North Atlantic. We have no immediate neighbors. Our closest neighbors are our friends in the Faroe Islands and Greenland. So would that be my message? Just stay alone somewhere? The world doesn't work like that. And on a more serious note, we know up in the North Atlantic that our security depends on the security of others. And yes, we have no military, but we're founding members of NATO. We've had a defense treaty with the US since 1951. And we know that as long as a full-scale war is being waged in Europe, we are not completely safe. So we have done our share. We have welcomed refugees from Ukraine and will continue to do so. We have offered humanitarian aid, economic aid. We've gone to greater lengths in that field than we have done before. So while all these caveats still apply, I believe that we can safely contribute. But you mentioned whether I am as optimistic or pessimistic or realistic as the Prime Minister, a good Prime Minister of Estonia. I think the situation also depends on where you are. Where you stand depends on where you sit, is an old adage. And I know that as head of state and previous academic. It's much easier to be an academic. Say whatever you want. We are in a difficult position now, and we must be careful with our words, but the message from Iceland is clear. Support for Ukraine is not wavering, but when it comes to actual decisions, we, in our splendid isolation up there, are not the ones to call the shots, as it were. So let that be the message from me to begin with. I'm here more to listen and observe rather than to give messages of direction. After all, finally, to conclude on that before we continue, it would be superbly hypocritical of me, coming from a state with no military at all, to call on others to send their sons and daughters into the battlefield. That's just not how it should work.
Thank you. Vice President, defense and security is often linked with tanks and bombs, but it's also in the electoral sphere, in democracies, in societal pressure. You're here in Estonia as part of your democracy tour around the bloc before the elections in 3 weeks now. What are your findings so far? Is Europe strong enough when it comes to protecting against foreign influence? Have you seen interference operations already in this election season work?
Yes, I cannot compete with any quote, so I will try to be wise myself. Now, I am traveling from state to state and offering support for those who organize elections. And wherever I go, I hear that to organize elections in this period of time is not business as usual. And when I already remember the preparations for elections in 2019, it was totally different story. Not only because of the war, but also because of the technological development. 5 years, big portion of history. In 2019, what we feared of, stealing of private data, Cambridge Analytica case. Of course, cyber attacks, disinformation at the beginning of having big influence. And also there was no set of rules for the political advertising online. 2019, 5 years ago. Now, what we are talking about in the member states, speaking about free and fair elections, which have to be guaranteed in every member state. Again, cyber attacks and the need to invest in the protection of the electoral infrastructure, espionage, lobbying, hidden lobbying, not only from, not so much from Russia, but from China and other actors. Corruption of politicians, which was disclosed recently. So the recent disclosure done by the Polish and Czech intelligence service just shows maybe the peak of iceberg, that there are many hidden ways how our enemies try to influence the public opinion and the results of the elections. And of course disinformation, but at its best. Sorry to say it like that, but being amplified by a very sophisticated system of artificial intelligence. This is the analysis. I am not here or in the member states to analyze. I try to find solutions or the measures to decrease the level of threat and manipulation. So we are discussing all the different tools which should lead to guaranteeing the free and fair elections without hidden manipulation, without the deep fakes totally misleading the voters' preferences. And at the end of the day, we have to trust the people, the citizens, that they will not be happy to be manipulated, that they will pay attention to the notifications, that they see the deep fakes, that they will be able to deploy critical thinking in swallowing or receiving different messages. We are now, 3 weeks before the elections. So I believe that these elections will show that we are well prepared. Also the digital sphere, the companies are now under the Digital Services Act have the obligation to trigger the so-called crisis protocol when they see some very harsh and potentially dangerous disinformation attack being prepared or applied in our information space, they have to act. So I don't want to speak long, but we have a lot of new tools which try to prepare the space for the elections, which will remain fair competition of real people, visions, decent communication, rather than just aggression, manipulation, and fake pictures which have the potential to mislead the people.
Thank you. Michał, is there a bit too much backslapping going on this panel, that we're okay, we're doing the right thing, we're moving in the right direction, we're getting stuff done? I mean, what's the reality?
What's the reality? That's quite a question there, Henry. Well, let me first say that it's great to be back in Tallinn at my favorite security conference.
Oh, I bet you say that to all of them.
No, this is a way to get back invited. Look, I'm probably closer to what President said, the not responsible academic, so I can be more relaxed with my words. I mean, on one hand, of course, I fully agree, as always, with my favorite Prime Minister. Kallas, don't say it to Donald Tusk. Now we'll stop with that backslapping. Look, I think it's clear that Europe is waking up. It's clear that West is waking up. But the question is if we are waking up at the pace of relevance. Looking if when historians look back at the moment we are in, they will probably look to February 2022 as the beginning of a worldwide conflict, with October 7th of last year being a second act, and hopefully that's it. But given that we have that level of threat, that level of instability, given that we have Russia, who, according to IISS study, can resource the war for another 2 years, given that we have really, and I think Andra and Richard in Foreign Affairs called on the other side, a pretty cohesive axis of upheaval, right? Russia, China working together with Iran and North Korea. They are at least working together. Are we doing enough? And I think the answer to this one, going to your point, is I think we have a lot of homework, and I'm very concerned about this. Unfortunately, not like Iceland, we are not. We don't have this splendid isolation. We are right there on the borders with Russia, just like Estonia, all three Baltic states. Fortunately, now also Finland, with its additional 1,343 kilometers of borders with Russia. I'm glad that they have more to worry about. But so and there are few very clear things that we need to do. I mean, we need to probably step up our risk appetite and give out more to Ukraine from our own resources, what we have right now. We need to make sure that European defense has sustainable financing. Prime Minister mentioned that 18 countries in NATO spending over 2%. I come from a country, from Poland, that is spending now 4% on defense. I think we need to have defense fund at the European level. We have to resource the defense plans, and we need to make sure the government and industry can work together. I still hear from the defense industry that they don't have predictability, even though we are, second year in the war. So I can be the guy glass half empty on the panel. The stakes are extremely high. Fortunately, more and more of us understand the stakes, but it is up to leaders from this part of the world, and I include, of course, everyone. Well, I'm not going to suck up to Prime Minister Kallas again, but Poland stepped up after our October 15th election to be one of the key voices, also within Weimar Triangle for this. So yes, we have a long way to go to the point that I could easily answer to your question. We are doing fine.
Prime Minister, Michał mentioned risk appetite. That's still lacking, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. I just wanted to react on this, your favorite conference and favorite prime minister. Have you seen the movie Campaign? It's like, window cleaners are the backbone of this country. And then, cooks are the backbone of this country.
It just happens to be true.
The candidate wins, of course, talking like this. But actually, I think, the headline of this conference as well, and Indrek's introduction, I think what we have to do is, we were maybe overly optimistic in 2023. We have to avoid being overly pessimistic in 2024. The risk the risk awareness is different in different countries because of our histories, because of our geographical location. I mean, some have better neighbors than we do have, and that also makes you assess the risk. And of course, in democratic countries, you have so many issues that you have to, or you want to spend the money on, the taxpayers' money, and defense. When it's peacetime, it doesn't really feel that it's really necessary. But regarding the defense industry and governments, I also see it's a bit of a chicken and egg issue. I mean, the defense industry says we don't have orders. The governments say that we want to procure, but nobody's offering things to us because they don't produce. So I think both need to step up. It's clearly also reading the room for the defense industry that these procurements will come. Of course, in democracy, maybe these things take time. They shouldn't take so much time because we actually don't have that much time. I wanted to also address what Věra said about European elections and the risk there. We see a lot of hybrid operations in different countries. What the Russians are really good at is really the social sciences. Getting in every society, really recognizing the disputes, the confrontations that are there, and pouring the fuel into those fires so that they could go, really, really wide. And it's clear that when we are at each other's throats, we are weaker for the outside adversary, and this is their intention. So, I mean, definitely they want to weaken the position of those who support Ukraine in the next elections. It is clear. Will they be able to do that? Because it is not only Russian influence, but it's also something that is really in our societies. People are saying that, oh, we have done so much for Ukraine, and we are kind of tired, and I mean, we shouldn't spend so much anymore, and the war is there, and let it be there, and so I think this is something that they are finding and really putting fuel into that fire, but I think in the long term we have to see that, like it was good quote from who was it? It was my favorite historian. I have other favorite historians. Timothy Snyder, who said, if we stop supporting Ukraine, then everything gets worse all of a sudden, and no one will be talking about fatigue because we will all be talking about disaster. Across all these dimensions, food supply, war crimes, international instability, expanding war, collapsing democracies. But of course, it's much easier to explain this here than it's explaining this in Spain or Iceland or elsewhere, who we are further away from the war.
It's also easier, I understand, to explain joint borrowing for defence in some countries than in the Netherlands or Sweden or Germany. How is that campaign? You mentioned finance.
Yeah.
Obviously, finance is very expensive. Defence is very expensive. How is your effort, backed by Emmanuel Macron, to get that moving? And also to the president. I mean, has there ever been discussions in Iceland we should be spending on defence simply because we're part of Europe, and now Europe needs us to chip in, even if it's a small amount? And how would that go down, do you think?
An Icelandic diplomat once told me this story from a NATO meeting during Trump's presidency, when Donald Trump was looking at let's just say it was a one-page memo on expenditure by NATO countries. Yes. And he didn't look happy at all. And then he saw Iceland. What on earth is going on here, he said. We do not spend as much. Traditionally, Icelanders have looked at the location of our island as our contribution to NATO, and felt that that was more than enough. And of course, NATO membership during the Cold War split society, and as in other countries, naturally. But I'm no expert on Icelandic politics.
I think you're the biggest expert in the room.
Defense expenditure does not loom large, and fatigue has not been that apparent in Icelandic society. We have been pleased to do what we can do in terms of offering shelter for refugees from Ukraine, in terms of offering humanitarian aid, hospital on wheels, and down to mittens for soldiers. The challenge has been when it has come to financing ammunition. That caused an uproar in Icelandic society. And those who were against it said it's one thing to, yes, give mittens to soldiers, but quite another to provide ammunition. But those who wanted to reply said a soldier with mittens is useless without ammunition. Of course. So it all goes hand in hand. It's basically just a matter of how you advance your support. But it's a good example of how delicate support for a friend in need can be. But fatigue has not been that apparent in Iceland.
But because you're not spending that much on Ukraine, and that's why the people, don't feel that something is taken away from them.
Indeed.
We are spending or really supporting Ukraine a lot, and of course, everywhere I go, I still hear these talks that, we have given so much, but I said that, it's 0.25%. That means 99.75% is still for Estonian people. So I think we can survive that, but it's maybe easier here than it's elsewhere.
Definitely. And if I may add to that, I think the focus should be on the idea, notion, and proposal that we're in this together, and what you are doing to support people in Ukraine and the war effort against an aggressor in Ukraine is basically a common defense for our common ideals. But I understand completely that it can be tricky in domestic politics to advance that argument.
On the defense funding, I think we have progressed in some areas. First of all, the European Investment Bank. That was a letter from 14 prime ministers that really opened these funds, and there is development there, which is good. Then second thing is, of course, the Eurobonds. It is not said completely that it's not doable. So I'm being around that table now for over 3 years. I must say that is a positive sign when it's completely not immediately said no, and people are thinking along the line. If that doesn't fly, let's find something else. And the third thing, what we have done here in Estonia, we did a defense investment fund. So what we saw with our technology sector, we have a very vibrant technology sector here. And of course, the war, conventional war that is going on in Ukraine has the old elements, but it also has the new elements. Different drones and unmanned vehicles. So they are able to do them fast, really test them on the battlefield. But the problem is that our startup sector, we have most unicorns per capita. So what they do well is raise capital from the funds. And they say all the funds are closed for defense, lethal aid, equipment. So trying to overcome that obstacle, we did a defense investment fund with the government money, putting seed money into it, and we are able to make it bigger so that we can actually develop those things because they are faster than the original or the traditional defense industry. But I think the key is the symbiosis of the old and the new, but it needs finances, and we have to be really creative there.
Thank you. Vice President, the Commission, of course, has put forward a proposal that would see it assume this enormous budget, or no one actually knows how big the budget will be, but assume it's quite big, to get involved in the defense industry. There's been some pushback from member states who say that's our job, ultimately, we should control defense spending. Is there pushback inside the Commission, or is the Commission totally sure that this is exactly what needs to be done, that Brussels needs to have a bigger role in deciding what European governments spend their defense money on?
I want to say that this pushback is dominant reaction, what we see. Rather, what we hear and what we see and what we understand from the member states is that there is a very big demand for synergy between what Brussels is doing, Brussels in the sense of European Union institutions and budget, NATO and the member states. And when you look at the peace facility, which we didn't believe when we designed the budget, we didn't believe that we will use the money. It was the era of innocence before the invasion of full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine, and now the $500 million is over, and we had to add more than I think 100 billion extra, and we simply see that the money from the European budget will be needed not only for the defense industry, for increasing and scaling up of the production, but also for the support, direct support for Ukraine. So there was, I think, very well functioning method of blending of the European money and national money, and these pushbacks were not really so decisive to stop it. Can I react on whether we are risk averse?
Yeah.
You provoked me because I want to come with my half full glass. I find it a miracle that our member states, 27, with different history, different reactions on Russia, different basic instinct, where I see the division between those who understand what is the impact of the Soviet or Russian soldiers' boots on its territory, and those who do not have this experience. The cultural sentiments, all those member states reacted in the same way. And yes, Hungary has a special role in it. But I decided not to fuel harsh discussions before the elections, so Hungary has a special role. I will stop here. But all this, that immediate reaction on after the invasion, using the defense money, triggering the first sanction package, I think within one week after the invasion, very common approach. For me, coming from the country who has this experience, and not only from 1968, but also 1938, when we went through a horrible lesson of appeasement, which did not pay off. I'm really happy that we do not repeat the same mistake, that we took some lesson from the history. And here I will have a quote. I also have to contribute somehow. I like quoting Churchill, who said after Munich Agreement, "You wanted peace and fame, and you have war and shame." And I think that this is exactly what we try to avoid now, and we are, I think, doing very well. The era of innocence is over. I think that Putin was counting with the European tendency to keep the comfortable life. And it didn't work, and it hopefully will stay like that. So,
you could argue that some European countries are very much choosing to keep a comfortable life at the moment. I mean, there is much more that could be done.
We all want comfortable life, but also it's important that decisive majority of politicians and with the decisive support from the citizens say we have to forget now. About having a comfortable life, because we have war in our neighborhood, and the war is also our war. At least we are in the information war, and we, I think, feel very close kind of threat.
If I may add just very briefly on that, of course, we should not go down the road of appeasement, but the world is a dangerous place, and the world is full of statespersons who are not to our liking, and sometimes we just have to accommodate and face the world as it is, and I should think that this is what was attempted to be done. annexation of Crimea in 2014 led to certain action in the West, but still we tried to not maintain a sort of, well, modus vivendi maybe. I went to Russia. I had meetings and went to international gatherings there. But then a line is crossed, and then the whole situation changes. So when we look back, I wouldn't call it appeasement before 2022, a realistic attempt to find the best solution, and then the decisive action in the other direction is taken by the aggressor, and then you have to face that stark reality, and a new situation emerges. So if you find academics or think tank people in the West who are saying, well, you provoked Putin, you created the situation you now want to tackle, then my reply would be far from that. We tried and we were willing, but the decisive decision was taken in Moscow, not the West, and now they have to face the consequences.
Michał, as our think tank person, we hear a lot about how, you know, the center of gravity in the EU has shifted and NATO has shifted east, and countries that have been for years saying this is going to happen if you follow this path were not listened to, and even I think it was Macron, I think in Slovakia, who a year ago who had said we were wrong to ignore you. Is it true though that the center of gravity has really shifted? Are people listening with both ears open to this part of the world? And do you think that this stronger Europe we're talking about building is being built in their image, or is it still being controlled by countries that don't take the threat as serious?
It's great to see a recognition from leaders that have been wrong, that they were wrong. That's nice. It was Thomas Bagger who described it a year ago, former ambassador. Anyway, everyone knows Thomas.
Michał's favorite former ambassador.
No, don't like Thomas. That the center of attention has shifted to the east. I think that's underplaying it. And frankly, there'll be others on the panel who would have a better sense of this. I think militarily, the center of gravity has clearly shifted to the east, both in terms of this is where the action is, but this is also where the money is being spent, where the societies are real, and we are basically convinced, right? Because the clear, we are talking about how European defense and defense in general is expensive. We kind of understand in this part of the world that what's really expensive is if Ukraine loses the war, and then we actually have to deal with Russians that feel victorious and are trying to push further. So I think we are still very much in the process. Looking at some of the appointments, and I will actually not talk about NATO, but the EU, but just yesterday, there was a election that probably not everyone here followed, election of EU's chairman of military committee. And a very good Polish general was there, Poland spending 4%, being serious and so on. And the job was given to an Irish general. Nothing against Ireland, love Ireland, but it's a neutral country spending 0.25%. So I think this center of gravity shifting needs to be confirmed not only by the words, by actions in terms of spending, but also in terms of leadership. And we have a new, there will be an opening after European election. There will be a high rep. There will be NATO Secretary General. There will be probably a Commissioner for Defense. Let's see who gets those jobs. And I think that would be one of the tests to answer your questions, and we are not seeing that yet.
Prime Minister Kallas.
I actually wanted to,
I haven't asked the question yet.
I wanted to react on that.
Sure.
The center of gravity is still France and Germany. I think the size also matters. This is clear that they are the biggest countries in Europe and they set the tone.
Sure.
So that doesn't change. But we just celebrated 20 years in European Union, and I had a very interesting debate with one of Estonian historians, and he said, when it was the interviews of people, so what do you like about European Union? All the people said, free movement of people.
Yeah.
But actually, what is the real value for us as a country is that we have a voice.
Yeah.
We have a voice around that table. We are being listened to. We are equals at the table. That means so much to us because we can actually also, influence the decisions that are made on the European level. And I think we have to keep that in mind. So center of gravity is still France and Germany.
As Michał says, there will be openings for jobs.
Where are you going with that?
You will be one of the 27 people who sit in a room and talk about who should get those jobs and ultimately decide a suggestion that the European Parliament then confirm. Is it your belief that one of those top 3 jobs, the European Commission President, the European Council President, and the High Representative must be from Central and Eastern Europe, or must be from a 2004 intake?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that we have been there for 20 years, and some in NATO for 25 years, and it's still coming from those countries who actually formed the alliance 75 years ago. So. I think it's fair to say that Central and Eastern European countries are not fairly represented in this. But how it will go after the European elections, I sincerely don't know, because I haven't been around those tables when the last time the top jobs were agreed to. I don't know how this process is, and when I'm listening to my older colleagues, and I don't mean in age, but I mean in really experience, then they clearly know how to play this game much better than we who have been in this club for not that long.
And would you like to have one of those jobs?
That is a new question. I've never heard that one before. Well, of course, it's an honor that even my name, circulates.
Is it? Is that a name circulating?
Yeah. I've read
You
it. I've
written
read
about
it. I've seen my name. But maybe I'm more like people always are very tentative to their own names. So I see my name, but that doesn't mean that it's decided. I was also named when the NATO was, and we know how that went. So,
well, it hasn't yet finished. So one of the most, and Michał, you referenced this. One of the real signs is not words but actions, and the best way to show a stronger Europe for this part of the world would be fulfilling the NATO defense plans. They've been laid out, they're very clear, they're very technical, they're structured. Everyone knows what NATO has decided, what SACEUR has decided this part of the world needs to defend itself. Are they being fulfilled? Are we seeing practical steps to make a stronger Europe, not just words?
We see practical steps, but we also see a lot of gaps. First, I was just telling to journalists yesterday that my military tells me that NATO works now as we thought NATO is working when we were not inside of NATO. So actually talking about the military plans, how to defend, what is the vulnerabilities and everything. But of course, these plans need to be fulfilled with equipment, really pre-positioned equipment, how the communication lines work, who gives orders to whom, how we exercise together. We do a lot of things together, which is a good thing, but there's still room for improvement. And there, I think this is also tied with the help to Ukraine and also the risk, meaning that if you have some capabilities and actually you are probably not the one who is in the gravest danger, then are you taking the risk and sending these things away so that, you know, your allies could defend, you know, the start of it, you know, Ukraine could defend themselves so that Russia does not go any further. So that is the question. And that is related, of course, to the democratic procedures that every country has. If there is not the feeling that it is an existential threat, then, you know, let's keep those patriots to ourselves and we feel safer. But actually, you know, the understanding has to really start from there, that we are in this together.
Michał, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on the plans, because I agree that this is one of the key questions for us. I mean, the deterrence and defense is not, and the plans with lots of Excel sheets is not as sexy as some other topics. And the one downside risk that we haven't yet talked as much about this in this panel is the role of the United States. Because right now, Cavoli's plans are to such large extent, of course, filled by American troops and American capabilities. But I'm, you know, I talk without any access to real documents because I'm a pesky think tanker. They don't look particularly well fulfilled before the Washington summit, and this is one of the key deliverables. So that's really the thing that will answer the question whether NATO can protect every inch or every centimeters of its territory.
Vice President, you mentioned earlier about the way in which Russia is trying to be successful in undermining these existing issues in European societies about defense spending, about support for Ukraine. Is it working? I mean, you've obviously been listening a lot to what's going on around the election. I mean, are you seeing an anti-defense spending and anti-Ukraine support plank emerge as a key factor in the election? Do you think it is going to play a role?
It will play some role because, of course, the plan of Russia is to roll out the red carpet for the politicians who will want to stop the support for Ukraine.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is what we expect in European elections and in many national and regional elections. This is quite clear plan. And whether they are successful, I would really love to know the figure, the amount of money Russia has invested into the brainwashing of Europeans. Since 2014, we saw big increase of narratives about the Ukrainians who are Nazis, drug dealers, the nation which is not nation, a bunch of people who do not deserve own state, falsifying history, all those things. They were creating this kind of narrative in our information space. And then when we invaded Ukraine, it dropped down. Because in some member states, there were 30-40% of people who had a tendency to believe these stories. And then after the invasion, we saw 2%, 5%. Of course, it's increasing. That's why we are now doing a lot to stop this trend, to increase the awareness campaign so that the people are aware that they are being manipulated. I don't want to repeat all the things which we are doing, but we are not underestimating the impact on the public opinion. The Russians are world champions in propaganda. They use the methods which we never will use, but I will always say, why don't we use the tools they do? So instead of complaining about social media and AI and all the technological means, why don't we use them better? Because we also need to deliver our kind of truth, evidence-based truth to the people. And what Kaya said before, how did you say it? That every confrontation is, I would say, celebrated in Kremlin. Every conflict we have in the EU is, of course, celebrated, but I don't believe that it's always direct Russian action in case of some crisis, because we had the shooting in Prague, Faculty of Philosophy, in December. Half an hour after that, it was on Facebook, the message that it was a Ukrainian man who did it. In Czech language, it was domestic production. Yesterday, after the horrible tragedy in Slovakia, and let's hope Mr. Fico will soon be better, and let's take lesson from it, because it's the politicians who are fueling aggression in the society, but it's another story. But also yesterday, I think 5 minutes after that, it was circulated in the information space in Slovak language. It's domestic production. So let's not always point to Kremlin. We have a lot of very capable pupils in the EU member states. And many of them are in powerful political parties. So this is becoming dangerous.
And powerful political parties that are on track to win 100 or so of the 720 European Parliament seats. You wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to react. The problem with the misinformation, and I think what it is doing is really, undermining truth, making people distrust everything. I mean, what can I really believe? It's real. And I must say, when I hear all these crazy stories, about myself or somebody, then I'm thinking that this is so crazy, nobody would ever believe this. And then I see how fast this goes. And people believe all these very, very strange things. But the outcome of it is that, it undermines the democracy, because it undermines media as well. You don't know what to trust. People, especially the older people, they don't make a difference. I mean, when they were young, when it was in the newspapers, in the media, in the TV or radio, that was the truth. Not in, of course, under occupation though, but I mean, this is the understanding. And now they don't make a difference if it is, some kind of link somebody's posting on social media, or it is, work of journalists, and they take it as equal value. And when they find out that it's not true, then they don't know what to believe anymore. And then you don't actually get with the actual points to them as well, because they don't know what to believe. And I think then you undermine democracy, and then this has severe consequences. What to do with this? We don't really have much tools.
It is true, if I may add on that, disagreement is the essence of democracy, the right to disagree, even forcefully. But we disagree with words and not weapons. So let us, send a message of support and hopes for a speedy recovery to Slovakia, as you rightly mentioned. And we think long-term, and we think short-term, we think hard security, we think soft security. And while we are maybe focused here on Ukraine and the situation as it is today, let us also not forget how we are going to make sure that our civil societies and democracies survive. And I think it could be and should be maybe part of the school curriculum in our countries to help the next generation. Well, maybe they should help us as well. They know these gadgets maybe better than we do, the older persons. But to help them understand that we live in a world where basically it is so easy to say anything about anyone. It is so easy to false anything about anyone. And we need to make sure that we sustain a belief as well in the pillars of society. So therefore we need strong, independent media, we need strong schools, strong educational system, and when I say that, I say as well, we are investing in security at the same time. So it all adds together.
You're all encouraged to take our FD subscriptions on the basis of we will take questions from the audience, so please think about them. There are some microphones that are floating around. But before I go to that, one part of a stronger Europe that of course hasn't been mentioned here is the inclusion of Ukraine into NATO and the EU. Perhaps, Prime Minister, President, you could talk about the NATO process and Vice President, the EU one. But is it correct to say that we won't have built a stronger Europe until Ukraine is in both of those groups?
I agree.
And how is that process going?
It's not going as fast as we would like to see, but again, democracies take time. Regarding NATO, Ukraine does not have that much time, so that is what I'm really worried about. How we can. The end of grey zones is the peace that we need, and this is what Russia is fighting against. But regarding European Union, there are, of course, different forces and different understandings, and as we all have done these procedures, it's not actually membership negotiation, it's just fulfilling the plans, doing the reforms that are very hard, that you have to explain your people. And I've said to the Ukrainians, there is no discount for you. You have to, do the reforms on rule of law, and it's also necessary for you. For your country, for your country's prosperity, you get rid of corruption, all these things. It also needs an effort from them, but we also need to discuss on the European level. And I am a big supporter of enlargement because that is a convergence machine, the European Union. We are a good example. I can tell you, I was just telling to President before, I had a member of Canadian Parliament here visiting who was last here in 1974, and we sat down and he said, I was here in 1974, and Prime Minister, I must tell you, you have really fixed the place. So this is how, even if you compare to the time when we were in the negotiation process, and now I think we have really fixed the place with the European Union. Thank you.
You're absolutely right that it's a wish list. It's a list of things that the Ukraine has to meet. But at the moment, the European Commission isn't even allowing that process to begin. So how can we tell Ukraine, all you've got to do is fulfill our wish list, if we won't even give them the wish list?
A general remark. This is the time for Europe to decide to grow. And we have totally different position before than compared with the situation before Juncker Commission, because I was sitting in that commission. I'm there too long. High time to leave because it's a long time. But I remember Jean-Claude saying we cannot do anything on enlargement because you have to clean all your disputes. Yeah, we will not import insecurity into the EU, and it was some kind of unilateral decision. But now I think that Europe is. If we want to play the geopolitical role and if we want to have stronger influence on the world around, we will have to take the courage to grow and take the process of enlargement very seriously and not to prolong things which do not have to be prolonged. It's a merit-based process. And as Kaja said, there is no war discount. We are treating Ukraine in the same way as all the other accession countries. They are doing well because they are developing the reforms. We are discussing all the difficult topics like justice, prosecution, fight against corruption, money laundering, oligarchs, media. This is heavy stuff also for our member states. This is not easy to reform these fields.
Yeah.
And they are doing all that in the wartime. And I admire that without being naive. Of course, I see the negative things. And at the same time, I think that we have to support not only Ukraine, but also Moldova. And Western Balkan countries which really show a willingness to continue the process. We should help them also to achieve that staged or first step of membership. Because we should stop speaking about it in the black and white mode, either member or not. Because there are a lot of fields where we can invite those potentially new countries as close as possible in the economic single market side, education, energy, infrastructure. There are many things where we can already invite them in. Last comment, we should be frank, and we cannot speak about enlargement without looking back home whether the EU is able to absorb the new countries. And this is about the governance model, about the already demonized veto. You will discuss it, Kaya, very soon. About the Article 7, about the budget and redistribution of big amounts of money. We should start a serious work on our side, not only to push the accession countries to do more and more.
Michał, I see your eyebrow is raised.
Yes, I didn't watch him.
No, because one country you mentioned a lot of, we focus on Ukraine, we focus on Moldova, and one country that we need to talk about during this conference at least is what's going on in Georgia, and actually a limit to what the accession to European Union brings us in a moment where, and I would say directly connected to the developments on the Ukrainian front and the initiatives from the Russian side allows foreign initiative, and Georgia is just turning geopolitically in the wrong direction. So that's my one thing. I really want to make sure that we think about what the West can do in this super difficult moment.
Thank you so much. We will take questions two at a time. If you could introduce yourself and make a question really, really short in respect to everybody else. Former president here in the front row, a gentleman here, the black tie.
Just something that was raised in the beginning about Eastern versus Western Europe, a little mathematics. There are 5 positions in the European Union and NATO that count: Commission President, Council President, President of the Parliament, High Rep, and NATO Secretary General.
Correct.
In the past 20 years, we have had 20 people. It's 4 times. We have 4 times 5 terms. In that period, 1.5 have come from Central and Eastern Europe. Point 1. Point 2. Vice President Jourova's good colleague, Franz Timmermans, said last November that Kaja Kallas is eminently qualified to become Secretary General, but we cannot take have a Secretary General from a country that borders Russia. I mean, who's the longest serving SecGen in NATO? 10 years? What country is he from?
Yeah.
So if you're going to ask about Eastern and Western Europe, I mean, the statistics, 1.5 out of 20, because a half is half a term as President of the Parliament, and you take those comments, don't tell me that there's no difference between Central and Eastern Europe, and I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Thank you. And also this gentleman here. Yeah, he's got the mic.
Hi, Hiroakita from Tokyo. So I'm from one of the most dangerous political location, maybe worse than Michail's country, surrounded by a big bear and big dragon and North Korea. So my question is about the emerging axis of war between linking North Korea, China, and Russia. Maybe likewise Iran and Russia, but focus on Asia and Europe. So as I observe, China and North Korea are enhancing its military assistance to Russia very drastically. Xi Jinping is in Beijing today. But in return, Russia is also providing massive military assistance to North Korea and also collaborating with China more proactively. So what is happening is that simultaneous crisis going accelerated in both in Asia and Europe, and that is the interest of Russia, North Korea, and China, because they know that US or West cannot deal with simultaneous war or conflict. So my question is, in order to avoid the 1938 Munich failure, which means war started in Europe, and 3 years later, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. So in the 3 years timeline, one war spilled over to the world. So in order to, if we are at the 1938 moment, what should we do more in order to contain all the risks together? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question and excellent point. Who would like to answer
Not
this?
me. I can start maybe. I think looking back, it's all very clear. I mean, history and in hindsight, it's very clear. I think the mistake that was made in 1938 and 1939 was that all these events that were happening were treated isolated events all across the world. Now we see actually the same thing. And we are treating these things also in isolation, like different conflicts or different tensions building up. I think our message, of course, to China is considering that they have very clear economic interest in Europe, is that if you continue to support Russia in this case, then you are cutting the ties with Europe, or this is dangerous to what you are maybe interested in. Is it enough? I don't know. It depends how strongly we say that, and because Europe also has interests in China. But I think what is clear, the lesson from 1939, 1938, is that if aggression pays off somewhere, it serves as an invitation to use it elsewhere. That was, Japan taking up the fight there because it paid off, and the attention is somewhere else. And I think that's why we have to have a very strong response to Russia's invasion to Ukraine, so that we are clear that it's a strong response, so that the aggressors or would-be aggressors in the world who are carefully taking notes would make a note that okay, maybe it doesn't pay off. But I'm not sure that we are acting as strong, or are we are keeping this strength for the years to come.
I will just voice my agreement here with Kaja. I first came to Estonia in 1994, not 74, but I will again agree with what that Canadian person said about how Estonia has moved in the right direction, most certainly. In 94, I was a young historian working on a thesis about Baltic independence a few years before, and I had a meeting with Lennart Meri, and he received me so gracefully, and I would like to... are there any members of Lennart Meri's family in the room?
Yes.
There. Thank you. I can tell you one or two anecdotes. Maybe one of them, in public, and the other one not so. But I will never forget that gracious gentleman. Now, also, coming to former President Ilves' point, when I'm in Estonia, I don't see myself as being in Central and Eastern Europe, and I mean, it's just a matter of geography. I find myself in Northern Europe, and I see how Estonia is basically a Nordic Baltic country, or however you define it, and Northern Europe is a place that contains Estonia, or Estonia is a part of Northern Europe to me. So, well, we're all parts of Europe somehow, even us, even though sometimes the map, excludes Iceland, and it can annoy me immensely, but that's just the way things are.
Just very quickly, our adversaries to Hero, I mean, our adversaries are connecting the dots. We need to connect the dots. We are beginning to connect the dots within NATO, for example, the participation of AP4 countries. You know, Japanese and Polish never understood each other as well as they are right now, at least not for a long time. And yeah, I mean, we are in fact facing the struggle between two camps. And let's recognize it and resources. And then keep fingers crossed for our American colleagues voting in November, because that will have a play a role.
You do want to answer now?
Yeah, I said I will not reply, but of course I need to say something. Of course, it depends on who are we to connect the dots. Because if it is us plus United States, then it will be a different story. But let's count with being alone.
Wow,
let's count with it, or partly alone. And we don't know what will happen on the other side of the Atlantic. By the way, I was in Washington recently, and there is not such a, not panic, but concern before the elections that they will be manipulated by Russia. I was surprised. But again, coming back, we made a mistake with Russia. We underestimated the threat. There was big portion of naivism, which led to big portion of dependence, especially in energy sector. Yes, so this is the lesson. We don't want to repeat it with China. That's why we analyzed very thoroughly the conclusions of the Communist Party Congress they had last year. And we adapted to it our strategy to China, which might need further adaptation soon after the elections. I cannot predict it, but depending on how much China will be supporting Russia in the conflict. But for the moment, we have the strategy where we have 3 tracks of work with China. One where we simply need to cooperate, climate change, world poverty, and newly, in my view, it's artificial intelligence. Because if they will be left alone to develop whatever they want, they might develop something which will have a very brutal impact on the whole world. These are global things. So there are things which we existentially need to talk about with Chinese and cooperate. Then there are spheres where we are competitors, and this is exactly the case of European stubborn insisting on level playing field on our market. So we are now looking at the subsidized automobile industry and so on. And then there are fields where we are direct rivals, and this is this security sphere, and this is, of course, obvious Chinese belonging to the other camp. And I guess my prediction is that we will have to come back to this strategy and look at this third part of it, and maybe take some more measures. But we will always have to see the other 2 pillars, because there are things where we simply need to cooperate.
Thank you. Gentleman here in the red tie, and yes, the lady here in the white shirt with the very straight arm.
Zurab Chiaberashvili, I'm from Georgia. I represent the largest opposition party founded by President Saakashvili. I'd like to, first of all, thank you, Prime Minister and President, having your foreign ministers last night at the rally, addressing them. It was very, very important, and thank you very much for that. My question would be about the risk appetite, which was very important here. The much we hear about from the West in Georgia concerning Ukraine is the Ukrainian victory. And more or less we know what does it mean. It means restoration in 91 borders, etc., etc. But we don't hear anything what Russian defeat means. And people avoid talking about that. And this gap between the Ukrainian victory and defeat of Russia is what is the gray zone in reality, and where the risk appetite or risk averse place there. So
Great question.
Your opinion about this.
Thank you so much. And
My question is kind of related to that, Miroslav Gungadze. I would like to take all of us back to trenches in eastern Ukraine right now. And the Ukrainian forces are fighting courageously, but they are lacking ammunition and they are lacking a lot of support. We all talk a lot and hear a lot of talks about we will support Ukraine to the end, and we will do whatever we can, and so on. However, the question is, how do you all see this war ends? Since in Kyiv and in other places and in China, there are talks about possible peace agreement. So I would like to ask you, how do you see the end of this war? Thank you.
great questions, both of them. Prime Minister, how does the war end, and what does Russian defeat look like?
Of course, I don't know how the war ends. This war ends, but it is up to us, of course, how we. What kind of effort we make to make this war stop. And I think Russia's defeat is that they don't achieve the goals that they want to achieve. This is colonize Ukraine. And if they don't achieve that, I think they haven't won. If they have won territories, then they have colonized part of Ukraine. So they have still won. I'm not worried about Russia's defeat at all. I'm more worried about when they win. What happens then? Because their appetite will grow, they have built up their military extremely strong, so they will want to use it again, because you have to really explain this to your people, and you have the the feeling of victory, and you want to go on. Europe is full of monuments to people, generals who have actually, conquered territories. So not here, because we haven't been a colonialistic power. But it's not with Russia. Of course. Peace talks. It is very important that. Everybody wants peace. Everybody wants. I don't know one single person in Ukraine who wants war. Everybody wants peace, but you want peace in, really sustainable peace, that you don't have to live in fear that this will all repeat itself again and again, even if you draw the line and have a pause for some time. So, of course, everybody is into. It's the human nature to seek for quick solutions and quick fixes for complicated issues. But the truth is there are no really quick fixes for complicated problems. And I think that we have to be prepared that this war doesn't end in any time soon. The lessons again that we have learned from Georgia in 2007, 2008. Crimea. The lessons were that many big powers thought that let them have what they want and they will settle down. What they learn from this is that we can do this. Yeah. We can do this in a bigger scale because nothing happens to us. And this is why the peace has to be sustainable. It has to have at least very important conditions. One is territorial integrity, sovereignty, but it also has to have accountability for what has been done, because they have never been responsible what they have done in Ukraine. I'm not going back further in history, but right now.
I should mention here that yes, we in the West more or less want to do and help Ukraine. Do I say whatever it takes? Well, I think we have to keep in mind what societies are capable of and how far you go before you start pressing people too much. And what constitutes Russia's defeat? I think Russia's defeat, or I hope that Russia's defeat would ultimately be Russia's victory. I have been an admirer of many aspects of Russian culture, literature, even history. Count Russian individuals as my friends. And I would hope that ultimately this notion that Russia needs the strong man and Russia needs to defend its honor and dignity would be replaced by development towards a more civil society and respect for institutions rather than individuals, strong institutions rather than strong individuals, and honor and dignity. Let's talk about honor and dignity when you're building hospitals and schools, and let's talk about honor and dignity when you care for human rights and individual freedom, and let's talk about honor and dignity when your neighbors do not have to fear you. That would be Russia's victory as well.
You also want to jump in, Michał, please.
But to do that, Russia has to lose this war.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yes.
And I think that would be victory for the Russian people, absolutely. And I think, I mean, one other point I would make on is that we are right now the two strategies, or the same strategy of as long as it takes and don't let Ukraine lose, depending on whether you talk in Washington or in Berlin. They are failing. This strategy is failing. Ukraine is bleeding out. So this is very real. So this is where we need to actually rethink this and recommit fully to a strategy that foresees this war to take on a longer time.
So, Věra, you wanted to jump in?
Just 2 sentences. It has to be for the Ukrainians to say, let's sit and talk about the peace, about fair peace. It cannot be us to tell them after them suffering so much and showing so much heroism that they should stop. This I cannot imagine it. It would be absolutely insane. Also unrational, because if Russians will win, they will of course have the appetite to go further. But also morally, it would be totally devastating to say them to stop. But there will be one day when the talks will have to start after the Ukrainians will want so. And then we will have to seriously speak about the reconstruction and about post-war arrangement. And here the role of us, Central and Eastern European people who have a voice in the EU will be absolutely key. That's why I would like to say that I am leaving European politics, but I would really like to see strong figures coming from our region who understand Russian mentality and who can predict what will come next from Kremlin to be sitting in the driving seat of this vehicle. It will be key.
Sure. Please.
Yeah, I mean, reacting on what President said, that you also have to see how far your people are able to go. But the question is about leadership, and leadership means that you go first. You explain to people, we have to do this, and that means sometimes the people follow you, sometimes they don't, and that is a risk. But that is true that like Plato said, the role of the government is also to educate people. What is at stake here? That's why we have to be very, very vocal about this. Then other thing that I wanted to react, listening, I agree that this can only happen when they lose. And this is, then there could be some change. Because I see in the Western world, I see this really innate wish to see Russia as democracy. Okay, maybe now a new leader comes and they are democracy. No, they are not. If there are not, a complete change in the society, they have never had that. And regarding. You said that Ukraine must not lose, and there's a difference between Ukraine must not lose or Ukraine must win. Yeah. Because, again, quoting one of my favorite historians, Timothy Snyder, who said that you don't always win wars, but you never win them if you don't set victory as a goal, because on the basis of that you make the strategies, you make the tactics, and you do everything. And now if the goal is that Ukraine must not lose, then you don't actually give the things that they need in order to win this war, and that is a problem, and there we don't have completely clear view, and I think a very, very similar view with all the European countries. What is at stake, and I see Sylvie Kaufmann here. I've been really telling about her book, and in that book that I recommend you to read. She shows how, in the past, also Germany and Russia have been seeing us, the Eastern Europeans, through Russia's lens, how Russia sees us. And that is the problem also with all the top posts and everything, because this is how they see us, like Russians see us. And I can tell you, this is not what we see in the mirror. It's what we see Europeans, that we have always been, even when we were occupied by Russia. We are, belonging to Europe, not to Russia.
We are sadly out of time. So for all of the brilliant questions that weren't asked, I'm very, very sorry. But thank you so much for all of of the questions that were asked. Thank you to the panel who were brilliant, Michał, Věra, Guðni, and Kaja. Thank you ever so much. Have a great conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to let you all know that those who have been invited to the presidential dinner, the buses are waiting for you downstairs, and I would appreciate it if you headed there. And with the others, we'll see you here for the Night Owl session. Thank you.